Thank you. That's always good. Also, I'd like to just direct everyone to keep their questions respectful. We have staff here. We very much appreciate them coming down and explaining the planning and development updates to us. And if they're not respectful, we'll take that opportunity away from you. So that's our one instruction for tonight. I have Carlos deMelo, who's the Director of Community Development here, as well as Kathy Kleinbaum, the Assistant City Manager, and Laura Russell, the Deputy Community Development Director. So thank you again, and feel free to go ahead.
Thank you, good evening. Let me know if I need the mic. We have a mic option, but sometimes that makes it a little bit awkward. So anyone in the back, just sort of raise your hand or get my attention if you can't hear me. It's a pleasure to be here. My name is Laura Russell. I'm Deputy Community Development Director. Many of you probably know Carlos. He's been here for many years. I've been here for just about going on 2 years. So it's my first time meeting with you tonight. So thank you very much for having us. So I'm going to go through some different planning and development updates for you this evening. And you never know what's going to happen. Okay, here's the agenda. I'm going to talk just briefly about the context that we're in with state laws. We're going to talk about some long-range planning initiatives. So that's what we're planning for the future of Belmont, and that includes the Harbor Industrial Area. We're going to talk about the Regional Commercial Zoning District, the Corridor Mixed Use Zoning District, the General Plan Safety element just briefly, and the Climate Action and Adaptation Plan. And then we're going to talk about a few development projects, including 580 Masonic, and then 2 projects that fall into the biotech or office category. So it's always good to pause and talk a little bit about the legal context that we are operating in. The state of California has made a lot of changes related to housing laws in recent years. We consider it to be a really ever-changing context. So it's mostly related to housing, but there's also laws that are kind of secondary to housing that also impact how we practice planning in California. It's very challenging for cities to implement all of these laws. They're interconnected, they're complex, they refer back and forth to each other. You change one law and it ends up changing a definition in another one. And importantly, and something the community's been talking about a lot lately, is these laws have really limited the city's ability to implement our own local planning policies. So they've taken away more local control over the years. It's kind of been more and more and more. So that's the context that we've been operating in. And most recently, just this summer, the state passed AB 130 and SB 131. And these are pretty big changes for how we operate in local government. It creates significant changes to CEQA, that's the California Environmental Quality Act. We call that environmental review, or maybe you've heard of EIRs, but there's different types of environmental review. And it really changes the application processing timelines for certain projects. And in this case, most housing development is now going to be exempt from CEQA, so there will not be an environmental review of many or most housing projects that go through that process. And if they go through certain requirements, including a tribal consultation with indigenous tribes, cities are required to review and issue approvals for many of those projects within 30 days after the application is complete and submitted to the city. So it's a big change. So we're going to talk first about long-range planning. And so for each of these topic areas, I've given you a map so you can kind of get oriented to where we're talking about, just in case some of these topics are new to you or you haven't engaged with them before. So first, we're going to talk about the Harbor Industrial Area, which I think many of you are familiar with, but it's on the south side of Harbor up to the creek, and it's kind of the other side. There's the San Carlos part of the Harbor Industrial Area, and this is the Belmont part. It's currently within the county in the unincorporated area, and the city is working on a specific plan in contemplation of annexing or bringing that area into the city of Belmont. So this is a long-range plan. It's a long-range vision. It's a 62-acre area. This is what we do first before we consider that actual formal annexation into the city. The area is intended to be an employment center, and this is an important part of what's in the city's general plan right now. The idea that Belmont doesn't have a lot of places for job growth for people to work, so this is an important area for that. Limited residential is anticipated. The mobile home park would remain at the far side next to the 101. And multifamily housing is anticipated along the north part in Old County Road and Elmer Street, kind of up in that corner. So right now we anticipate plan adoption in early 2026. So kind of the spring timeframe is what we're thinking right now. And we want to make sure folks know that the redevelopment of this area is anticipated to occur over a long time period. We're anticipating probably 20 to 30-year time horizon.
Wow.
So many of you, I think, are familiar with certain aspects of this. Some of you were at a community meeting that we had on May 12th earlier this year. We also had a meeting with mobile home park residents in August, just now this summer. We discussed a wide range of topics, and we had an emphasis on the development standards at that May 12th meeting. We introduced some key concepts for the community to give us feedback on, and some important ones there were related to maximum height. And we established this idea that there would be what we call a base height. So that's the basic height that buildings could be built at, and we're basing that base height off of basically the existing height that the county has right now, using that as kind of like the benchmark. And then that's 65 feet. And then talking about a taller height with what we call community benefits. And that's a way for developers, when they are working on these kind of development projects, to contribute back to the city that they are coming to. And sometimes that'll take the form of physical things that they may build, such as infrastructure or other things that the city may need. And it also may take the form of an actual cash payment to the city for the city to use for other things that are in the community's interest. And so that concept has become an important part of the HIA specific plan. And so when you see our materials from the city, you'll see that there's two different heights, what we call the base height and what we call the community benefits height. So we talked about this quite a bit at the May 12th meeting. We talked about the limitations on the height. One of the important limitations is related to the San Carlos Airport. So buildings can only be so tall, and that varies a little bit in the different parts of the HIA area. So we explained that. We also talked about this concept of the residential transition zones. So I'm not going to go into all those details because we did that on May 12th. But those PowerPoints are all available on the HIA website. We can share all that and talk about that information when we get into questions and comments. But I think an important part for this audience is for us to just let you know that we received strong feedback at that meeting, particularly related to the heights and the community benefit height, and also related to the residential transition areas. So that's kind of like the setbacks and the relationship between the residential areas and the buildings being proposed. It's not quite. There we go. Okay, so here's an example of one of the types of slides that we presented at that meeting. This is the relationship on O'Neill Avenue between existing single-family homes, and this idea of the height getting taller as you got farther away from the street. So these are the types of things that we explained on May 12th in the proposal. This is an example. At that time, the height proposed was a maximum of 185 feet, and that's about 11 stories. It's worthwhile noting these kind of commercial buildings have taller floor-to-ceiling heights than like what you have in your house, right? So each floor is quite a bit taller. So just to try to give you a sense of trying to picture that, about 11 stories is the way to picture that. So these are the kinds of diagrams that we provided that we received that feedback on. So current status. Right now, the staff and consultant team, we're preparing alternatives in response to that community feedback, especially related to height and the setbacks in the transition areas. So that's what we've been working on, and we're working on it especially right now. Also underway is the environmental impact report. And so we have analysis that's ongoing. So we've got a highly qualified team of consultants that's doing a series of reports and analyzing the different topic areas that are required under the Environmental Quality Act, California Environmental Quality Act. We're also working on a number of different technical reports right now That includes infrastructure, especially stormwater and sewer. So those reports are happening right now, as well as transportation. So how do people move throughout the area, both in vehicles and cars, and as well as bicycles and pedestrians. So that analysis is happening right now as well. So as those reports get finished, they become part of the plan and part of the environmental impact report, but they're all still in the working and kind of early draft stages. So there's not public information around those yet, but there will be upcoming. So in terms of the next steps for HIA, on October 14th is a tentative date. It's pretty firm, but it's not 100%. So everybody kind of keep that in mind and keep your ears open. We're gonna have a city council meeting where we're gonna bring those heights and transition zones to the city council with some alternatives based on that feedback that we got from the community and get their feedback on how we may want to pursue different alternatives to that. So we're looking at different heights and different approaches to the transition zone. So you can kind of stay tuned. That's a big upcoming meeting for everyone. Okay, next I will transition to the regional commercial zoning district.
Can you, sorry,
Yeah.
I noticed on the Zoom, we're stuck on a slide that's several slides behind, so we may have to refresh or something. I want to make sure. Yeah, now we are
Okay.
back.
Okay, let's keep an eye on it. I don't know why it would do that, except some of them are really graphics heavy. So I might just need to slow down a little bit. Thank you. We can keep our eye on.
All right.
This is big files. Okay, so the regional commercial zoning district is on the east. One, and it's shown that it's also some kind of like some pink and some red. So this is traditionally a commercial area of the city, and the city council has asked us to kind of modernize that in terms of what kinds of land uses and what kind of development we're seeing in the more recent markets that we've been experiencing. So the city started this work back in 2023, and the council directed us to pursue tiered development standards. So kind of similar to what we were just talking about. Thank you. In the HIA with this idea of a base level and a community benefit level. So that same concept applying in this part of the city as well. And then the market started to shift and people were not as interested for right now in doing office or biotech development. So we kind of slowed down a little bit to kind of keep our eyes on that and see if we maybe wanted to approach it a little bit differently. And then we went back to city council in April of this year and got some new direction and feedback from them. At that time, we reviewed some preliminary development standards. So we did talk them through some options around height and sort of intensity and floor area. So if that's something that you're interested in, that would be a great city council meeting to go back and take a look at if you're interested in those details. And we also decided on a new approach to the environmental review. So the city is going to be doing an environmental impact report for development in that area so we can look at it comprehensively. And then that will allow future projects to have a little bit of streamlining under CEQA, but that way the community gets that full picture of what the future may bring. And so some key aspects of those zoning amendments, we want to reorganize and modernize. This is something you'll hear me say a couple times. We've got sections of our code that are getting kind of old, and we want to refresh them up to modern standards. The city is considering increasing the height and the floor area ratio with community benefits, as I mentioned. The land uses would mostly stay the same, but make it clear that research and development facilities would be permitted in the area. The language right now is not as clear as we would like it to be. So in terms of next steps, we're going to identify a consultant for the environmental impact report, return to council for approval of that contract. That takes a year or a year and a half to prepare. So this is not something that you're going to see happen immediately, but it's just kind of nice to know that we'll be working on it in the background. And then there'll be additional public outreach and planning commission and city council review. So it's too soon to really set a schedule for this of the completion, but it's something you may want to keep your eyes on if you're interested. Okay, now we're going to talk about corridor mixed use zoning district, and that is along El Camino Real, kind of on both sides of our Belmont Village specific plan, to the north and to the south, to the city limits on both sides. So the effort here has a couple of different pieces to it related to the corridor mixed use, the CMU district. The idea is to adjust the height and the floor area along El Camino Real to make sure that we're encouraging the types of development that the city would like to see there. So we've gotten some feedback from the city council a couple times on this. Again, we want to modify and simplify some requirements. Right now, we have parking requirements that are spread in different places in our code. We're going to bring them all together, make it easier for people to understand. We're hoping this will help local business quite a bit to make that part easier. So some key changes that we're considering in the CMU district is to increase the development potential specifically for hotel uses. This is an economic development approach that the council has elected to take. We're also talking about increasing the base height by 5 feet to encourage ground floor uses. So we had an architectural consultant help us analyze our heights, and we realized that we need a little bit more wiggle room so that people would be more inclined to put commercial active uses on the ground floor. So we think that that extra 5 feet of height is going to help with that. We're going to bring all those parking requirements into one chapter, make them easier. In July of 2024, we got city council feedback, and then we had a community meeting just almost a year ago now. And then we've been working with our team to do all the technical amendments to actually do that work. So that's pretty much finished now, and we are getting ready to go to Planning Commission. So Planning Commission is going to have a public hearing on September 16th. Depending on where some folks live, you might get a notice in the mail. And there's a website for this too, and we can talk about that, and we can point that to you if you're interested in following this. So that September 16th date is set right now, and then the city council review is anticipated in October following that. Next is the general plan safety element. You might not have heard about this, but you probably know that we have what we call our general plan, and it has different chapters, and we call those chapters elements. So you heard about this when we're all working on a housing element. Well, there's also a safety element, and this is required by state law. It identifies hazards and establishes policies to protect people and property. And safety elements are getting updated these days to address climate resilience as well. And there's a trigger in state law that when you update your housing element, you also have to update your safety element. So there's a number of cities in San Mateo County, about 9 cities that are working together to update our safety elements, and all of that is happening right now. So in terms of where we are, what's happened so far is we created some reports and analysis of vulnerability assessment. What are the issues around safety that we want to address? There's been a series of community engagement meetings, so those pieces are done. Right now, we have like the initial draft of the safety element where all of our technical folks are reviewing it, and then that will be available then for public review of the draft safety element. And then there'll be planning commission and city council study sessions, there'll be a community open house, and then consideration for adoption. So those next steps are anticipated this fall and going into the winter. So we're kind of trying to time all of that. So the timing of this is not for sure yet, but also just so that you know that that's happening. Next is the climate action and adaptation plan. And this is kind of we're just getting going with this. There was just a planning commission presentation on September 2nd, and there's been some opportunity for the public to get involved in this. And if you were involved in the general plan adoption, this is back in 2017, the city adopted its first climate action plan, and we're now updating the plan to bring it up to best standards and also use the new data. And so the goal of these climate action and adaptation plans is to reach the state's 2030 target, and that target is 40% below the 1990 greenhouse gas emission levels. So that comes from a state law. Sounds kind of random, right, to just regular folks, but there was a law that passed that sort of set this milestone, and that's what we are working towards. So as I mentioned, the community engagement is underway. There's an online survey that you can visit, and if you're interested in hearing more, you can look at those materials from the Planning Commission meeting that just happened, I guess 2 days ago, yeah. And then the City Council presentation on September 9th, and there'll be a community workshop, a virtual one, on September 11th. So in terms of how long is this going to take, we expect, we have a whole process and all the steps that we go through, and adoption is anticipated in fall of 2026. Okay, so now we're going to do some project updates, actual, construction development projects. So a lot of folks are talking about 580 Masonic, so we wanted to touch on that and make sure people are engaged in the conversation and know the status. So this is just a summary. This is not a full presentation, but I'll give you the date if you want to go back and look at those full presentation materials. So this is a residential apartment building with 140 dwelling units, including 25 affordable units. So if you're new to these kind of conversations, that's capital A affordable, meaning it has a definition that comes from state law, and it's kind of complicated, but you know what I mean? There's always state laws about what that means and the level of affordability. We can talk about that if you want, but just want to make sure people know that there's a legal definition of that. The building would be 5 stories, 60 feet in height. It's about 147,000 square feet. It has parking for 138 vehicles and 142 bicycles. There's a unit mix of different sizes of units. It's 39 studios, 68 one bedrooms, and 33 2 bedrooms. Many of you are familiar with this, of course. It's the shopping center that's bounded, by the 4 streets on all the way around Masonic, Granada, Wessex, and Taylor. So I mentioned earlier, we're in this legal context that's put on us by the state of California. Really important for this project to try to everybody understand it as well as we can. It's complicated. So some of the things we have to keep in mind is Senate Bill 330, the Housing Crisis Act, removed obstacles to housing development. That was a few years ago. The California State Density Bonus Law has existed for a long time, but there's been many amendments to it in recent years. And all of those amendments have gone on the side of more flexibility for developers and less local control. So a lot of folks don't realize it's been around for forever, 20 years or more, but it's only really in recent years that it got so kind of strict on cities and permissive for developers. There's been a lot of changes. There's 3 main categories that it's good to understand a little bit. It's actual density, meaning the number of housing units above what would normally be allowed by the city's zoning. And then waivers to development standards. So those are the physical things, the physical aspects of the building are associated with waivers. And then incentives or concessions are related to what things cost, okay? For this project, there are waivers that were proposed by the applicant, but there were not any incentives or concessions that were proposed by the applicant. They had the legal right to, but they did not ask for any. And then the next concept to understand is by right processing, okay? And that's in quotes here because that's a terminology that the state made up, that the legislature made up, that we all had to figure out what that meant. They defined it in the law, and then it's been interpreted as we've gone forward. And so by right processing comes from housing element law, and this site is eligible for that for a couple of different criteria. This site is identified in our current housing element, and 20% of the units are affordable to lower income households. And this site is carried over from the past housing element. So when we put those pieces together, this site is eligible for by right processing. And what does that mean from practical terms? It means that no discretionary permits are allowed. And so if you've participated in any planning commission meetings or seen anything happen before, there are certain, the planning commission can use their discretion, their judgment on certain topics, but on other topics, they're not allowed to use their judgment. They are limited to what we call objective standard review. So objective standards are things that are typically numeric or measurable. They're the things that basically any person would reach the same conclusion, or they may be things that you have to be an expert to understand, but it's still measurable, right? Like I couldn't do the math to be able to figure out how much water is needed, but an engineer that knows that could do that and reach a conclusion, so that's still an objective standard. So the Planning Commission was limited to looking only at objective standards for this project. And because it was subject to by right processing, the California Environmental Quality Act does not apply under law. So what's the latest information? Probably many of the people in this room know that the project was reviewed and approved by the Planning Commission on August 19th. So if you want to go back and look at those materials or watch that meeting, you can, available on the city's website. That decision was appealed by a resident. So the city has received an appeal. And what that means is that then the project has to go up to the city council for the city council to consider that appeal. So it's too soon because, you know, the appeal has just come in. We are analyzing that appeal. So we can't give you too much information about that yet, except to let you know that the project has been appealed. And then the city council will hear this at an upcoming meeting. The date's still to be determined, but that is likely in October. Okay, so everybody can kind of keep an eye on it. I know you're very interested. And then the updates are going to be posted to our development projects page. This is the easiest way, I think, to find it, belmont.gov/development projects. That's the friendly URL that will take you to the project page that has all of the projects. And then you're just going to scroll down to the 500-580 Masonic page. Okay, so we're going to be doing some updates to that page tomorrow. So if you go right now, it's not updated, okay? But if you go like end of the day tomorrow, it should be, depending on how the day goes for everybody. So next couple of days, we'll get those updates on there, and that's where we post the information about the upcoming schedule. Okay, so that's where you want to go to keep up to date with that one. Then we want to make sure that you know about 2 biotech and office developments. So these are in the areas that we already talked about. Okay, so as you're aware, there's been a slowdown in the market. This is Bay Area wide. This is nothing really to do with Belmont. We're not anticipating any new construction in these kinds of buildings for the next 3 to 5 years. It might be longer. We're all in a lot of uncertainty right now and a lot of economic uncertainty. But these applicants, some of them are moving forward with their projects and some of them have put their projects on hold. So the city was processing 4 big office or research and development projects, biotech. 2 of those are no longer going forward, but 2 of them are. And one of them is 1301 Shoreway. This is in the RC zoning district on the east side of 101. So this one is proceeding right now, and it's the picture on the top. It's a 7 to 8 story building, kind of at the different points. For reference, it's 145 feet. Helps you to understand some of the different heights that we're talking about. And then the Beam Reach project is at Harbor and Industrial. This is within the HIA area. Okay, so this project cannot be approved and cannot move forward until the specific plan is completed. Okay, so it's completely dependent on the specific plan and couldn't be constructed until after the annexation. So this is looking out, okay? This is looking out a few years. They're really planning for the future here. It's proposed to be 7 stories and 133 feet to the tallest point. I'll point out that I mentioned earlier, there's a relationship to the San Carlos Airport. This project site is the closest to kind of that airport flight path. So this is the most restrictive area of the HIA, basically. And so 133 feet is the tallest, basically, it could be. You know, there's a little wiggle room, but for the airport, you have to measure to the top of everything, all of the equipment, everything. So think about this as like, this is the tallest a building could be at that location. And then I mentioned there were 2 projects that have been put on hold that are not going forward. And that was at 601 Harbor, and then also on the other side of the freeway, Island Parkway. Okay, so that wraps up the presentation part of this. So I'm happy to try my best to answer questions. Our team is here.
Thank you so much for that presentation. Will the slides be made available to Carrie so we can send them out?
Sure.
Is that possible?
Sure.
Okay, thank you so much. So you said you already have a question. I'll start with Zoom.
Sure.
Sandra, if you want to read that out for everybody, hopefully everyone can hear.
All right, thank you. I think we have Ame Shroff. He's asking, I think this was in the context of the 580 project. Do they have to meet each of the by right eligibility or just one?
They have to meet all of the by right eligibility in the state law.
Got it. Thank you. So far, those are the only questions on Zoom.
Hey, Sandra. Can I speak and ask a question?
Sure, that's fine.
Sure.
Oh, fantastic. Oh, thank you so much. Thanks for taking the questions. I have two questions. Thank you for answering that one. So they just have to, or sorry, they have to meet all of them. I did the math just on the back of a napkin, like 25 affordable units versus 140 total. It doesn't come out to 20%. So I'm curious like where the math is there. And then a second question about the kind of specific plan for Harbor Industrial Area. What's the plan for, like, I've seen the kind of layout. It doesn't show what happens to the end of all of the streets like Elmer, Furlong, Hiller, like they're kind of closed off right now. Is there a plan to open them up?
Okay, let me take those one at a time. I have a little backup slide because I know this is one of the things that people might be interested in. It gets kind of technical, okay, so bear with me. And I will do my best to explain. And so look, probably the best place to look here is in the second bullet point. Okay, so we've got some basic requirements for people to include affordable housing. That's the first bullet point. And then each applicant chooses themselves what combination of different types of affordable units they want to put together in their package, because the state laws, I told you, were all complicated. So you can kind of tag in to different areas of the state laws depending on the package you put together. So they have very experienced attorneys that work with them to understand those laws and figure out like what's the combination to work for the project that they would like to propose. So in this particular case, what the applicant is proposing is 15% very low income. So that's a definition by the state of California. So 15% of what we call the base number of units. Okay, so 15% of the base of 70, that's 11 units. That's in parentheses, 11 very low income units.
Actually, maybe just before you get into that detail, I think what a critical point is, because you're saying the math, and you're right, that 20% of 140 is not 25. So the point of what she's about to go into, but I just want to put it out there, is that percentage is based off of the base project. So it's not based off of the 140 units. It's based off of what the development standards that exist without using density bonus would allow that project to be built at. So that base project is only 70 units. And so it has to provide 20% of 70 units in order to qualify for the by right processing. And that is less than the 25. So now she'll go into why there's actually 25 and not fewer.
Yeah, thanks. It's complicated, right?
Really complicated.
Like it really takes a team. So yeah, so thanks Kathy. It's like we have this concept of the base project, right? And like we're wrestling with this math all the time, I tell you. Okay, so 15% very low income, 15% of 70 is 11 very low income units, okay? And then they're proposing 15% moderate income units, also 11. But you heard me earlier say that criteria for by right processing was 20% lower income units. They didn't have that because they only had 15%. So then the applicant added 5% low income units. That's 3 low income units. And then that's how they triggered the by right processing. Okay, because they had the 15% very low income plus the 5% low income. Now they've got a total of 20% lower income units that qualifies them for the by right processing. So I hope that answered that question. And then I can go to the Harbor Industrial Area question about the closed off streets. There is not a proposal to open the streets. The assumption is that the streets that are closed will stay closed. So everything we've done so far, that's been the assumption. This is a whole planning process, do you know what I mean? But so far, that's been all of the assumptions and the analysis that we have been conducting.
And I do want to add, we didn't get into it, this is something we talked a lot about at the May 12th meeting, but all of the development on Harbor is anticipated that the large scale development, all the driveways and all the access will be off of Harbor. So not off of O'Neill, sorry, and then O'Neill. So those projects, yes, obviously they'll produce additional traffic in the area, but that traffic will be directed onto Harbor.
Okay, so it's like, you can kind of imagine, you probably know the area well. There's a certain number of kind of small businesses that front on O'Neill, okay? If those businesses remain, many of them will, right? Then they'll continue to take their access off of O'Neill. That doesn't change. If existing businesses stay open that have access off O'Neill, that will not change. But if a big commercial development, like an office or an advanced manufacturing or something big comes and builds a new building on that stretch that has access off of Harbor, then the plan would make them have their driveway in the Harbor direction. It would not, the plan would be drafted to not allow those big new developments to have access off of O'Neill. So just saying the same thing Kathy's saying, like in a different way, right? Because it's a really important point, I think, for folks to understand.
Thank you, guys.
Karen, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead for the speaker on Zoom.
No, he was just saying thank you.
Oh, okay. What about Karen, just to clarify?
Exact concept.
Okay, so
Same concept. So we're kind of working through like the access, do you know what I mean? It has to do with how the parcels are laid out and trying to anticipate if parcels may combine in the future for the purposes of development. But the intent absolutely remains the same. It's just a little tricky the way that Karen and Harbor and the freeway all connect. But so that you know what the intent is, and we're working on the details.
thank you. Good question.
Yeah, one of my neighbors, Bouchons, sent me a flood report map, and I know there was a geotechnical report, I think it was 2022, he was telling me, that said there shouldn't be any flooding, but then 2023, we had all this flooding on El Camino. And my concern is there is a water table that's underneath 580 Masonic. How does the general plan safety element deal with the fact that there could be potential flooding in that area? Because the EIR isn't required, but yet that could be an issue. Does the general plan and safety element deal with that? Do we get into more geotechnical to make sure before they start digging, they're not going to create a flooding issue potentially in there in that particular location?
Okay, great question. Let me hit it a couple of different ways because we did get a question from the community leading up to this meeting about the flood maps. And so we did double check just to make sure we didn't miss anything. Our team went back and went to the FEMA site and did a fresh search on the FEMA site. And this site is not identified as a hazard area on the FEMA map. Okay, so that's one issue. And I can share that if folks are interested, share that map. And then in terms of what do we do locally?
Right.
Okay, so we have our general plan and our general plan EIR from 2017 anticipated, as you know, quite a bit of development throughout the Belmont Village specific plan area. And so there's a list of what we call mitigation measures, and there's also a list of standard conditions of approval. And so they address a lot of the things that an EIR might if there was one.
Okay.
But we already have mitigation measures and conditions of approval. And honestly, they're pretty strict. Like I've worked in some other cities and ours are pretty strict. And so there's like a list of reports that they either have to, the applicant has to do that report or demonstrate why that report is not necessary from a technical point of view. And so the geotechnical folks have done their preliminary reports that you normally do in the planning phase. And then they do a more detailed geotechnical report at the time of building permit, like review of the building permit construction drawings. So those steps will absolutely happen. And so that's normally when they would catch any of those kinds of issues and adjust both the construction methods as well as the building construction type to address anything that may come up.
Because I know when they did the Hayden, there was sewer issues that came down 2 Sterling downs, and they had to do a whole ripping up of the street and do a whole fix of the sewer, and that was because of the Hayden. So hopefully we can avoid something like that on this one.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, thanks.
So just if I can, piggyback on the flooding question. So I worked with the county for a number of years in the road division, and we had an incident not so many years ago where there was significant flooding at the mobile home park. And the problem really is, and I don't know when they did the study how they looked at it, but the problem really is the water that's coming down from the west, unless Caltrans's facilities, their ditch that runs parallel to 101, and their drainage facilities that go all the way down Sem Lane, unless those are functionally maintained the entire time, the water has no place to go. And part of the problem with climate change, sea level rise, is the outlet pipe at Sem Lane. And when they built it 50 years ago, it daylighted much of the time. And as sea level rise gets higher and higher, we're stuck with this condition where if the tides are high enough, the whole system cannot drain. And so I wonder if there's the theoretical of if everything's functioning correctly, yeah, it ought to drain bottleneck there because the outlet pipe is underwater. The pipe that goes under 101 all the way down Sem Lane is filled with loads of debris all the time. Even if Caltrans goes ahead and cleans out that pipe every fall, which they don't, and even if they cleaned out the ditch every fall in advance of winter, my concern would be that I think the water really doesn't have the ability to drain. So I'm not sure where the FEMA flood maps, what they're showing there, but I think the reality is there isn't a system right now that functionally can carry significant stormwater away from that area. And so it seems to me that in a large storm event, flooding like we experienced a few years ago, where there was probably, the mobile home got hit hard pretty a few years ago. And even a couple years ago, when I walked down there, the last 3 streets of the Homeview community, floodwaters backed up all the way to that point.
So you're absolutely right. This is a huge problem. And this is part of the infrastructure analysis that's part of the Pacific Plan. There have been some improvements that are being looked at and considered. I think the one that is most feasible and anticipated is an additional drainage bypass that goes under the freeway, so an additional one to what already exists. It's not a cheap solution. I think the last cost estimate I saw, which was from some time ago, was $20 million. So this isn't like going to happen tomorrow. But that is part of the infrastructure analysis that goes into the Pacific Plan, and the city has to look at financing mechanisms. We are also trying to work with Caltrans to make sure that they do more regular maintenance. They are scheduled this year. So it was supposed to start maybe sometime in August. I'm not sure if it's occurred yet, probably not. I think it has to happen just before October, but they have a live permit because you need a permit from one of the water agencies, ECDC maybe. But they have a permit where they're going to clean out the pipe. And you're right, like it's not going to happen yearly, but it is going to happen this year. But flooding, especially at the foot in the mobile home park, is a huge issue. It's a major concern. And it's something that will be analyzed in the Pacific Plan. I can't promise that there's necessarily solutions or affordable solutions. It's a really tricky situation, but we are aware of it and we are taking that into consideration.
There's a question on Zoom.
Yeah.
Danny, do you want to go off mute and ask your question? Danny Gilbert on Zoom.
Hi, thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, this is in reference to the previous slides that mentioned the community, I think it's called the community benefits, and it was associated with the height of the buildings, and then it said with some community benefits. Could you review what those community benefits are?
Sure. So the city council has identified some priority, what we call buckets. So there's sort of very broad categories of community benefits that they would consider in exchange for additional development standards. So one of the top priorities right now today is the reconstruction of the Barrett Community Center, which is, our 75-year-old community center, much loved, much used, but desperately every day getting older and less feasible to maintain as a building. So that is one of them. Public infrastructure is included, and that's very broad, and that can include anything from major traffic improvements that benefit the entire city to things like stormwater, like flooding improvements that we're talking about, that would help improve flooding in that area. Also, more general public recreation opportunities, so improvements to local parks, fields, courts, all those things. And that can include improvements to existing ones or the provision of new public recreation facilities on site. As an example of that, I believe 1301 Shoreway is going to have like basketball courts that are going to be available to the public to be able to use. So that's just an example where private development may include a public benefit on site. And in addition, it could include also childcare or some just general funding to help with like ongoing city services like public safety. So these are the broad buckets that the council has identified as their top priorities. What each project gives, whether it gives just a cash payment that can be used for any of these, or whether it targets specific things off of that list, is kind of determined at the time that the project is moving forward for its approvals and is negotiated with the city council. As an example, the Stanford project, which didn't end up going forward, unfortunately, had separate contributions sadly, it had a $5 million contribution, which we will no longer get towards rebuilding Barrett Community Center. It had a $2 million contribution for Ralston roadway improvements. So it had like some from multiple of these buckets on their list of improvements.
How many of those are in the east side of Belmont? It seems like all of these community buckets are west of El Camino, which is great for the west side. But since we're getting the brunt of all these big tile buildings, how many parks and roads, et cetera, are being fixed in our neighborhoods? That's the concern for a lot of people. They see all these community buckets and they go, great, how does that affect us? We get all the negative stuff and the west side gets all the positive stuff. We want parks, we want our roads fixed. Homeview roads are terrible. I don't live in Homeview, but those roads are wrecked. I mean, we need to, if we're gonna give community benefits, why not put it in the area where they're seeing the most negative effects of traffic and giant buildings going up? We need to get some of those community buckets in our neighborhood.
That's all part of the negotiation process that can happen before the city council. I know that there are several parks in these neighborhoods that probably could use some upgrades and improvements, but also things like Barrett Community Center. I'm sure all of you at some point in time have had a child or taken a class there. So it is for sure a citywide asset that serves the entire community and not just the people that live directly adjacent. So there's some combination of that, is what I'm trying to say. I hear you, I definitely understand the point. I will tell you that a project in your area is not gonna pave or paving improvements up by 280, right? Like that's not what's gonna happen. But all of you drive on Ralston. Hopefully all of you use Barrett or will.
Jill, do you have a question?
But I would just add to that, this is the kind of feedback that it's important for the community to give to the council.
Right.
So when you're engaged in these, this is when you come to the podium and say, we want to make sure some of those community benefits are reflected in this neighborhood too. So it's an opportunity to participate.
Sandra, this is Danny again. One more question. I heard you mention negotiations for these community benefits, on with the city. Do we get a voice in that negotiation, just as we're speaking to?
I think it's part of this general feedback process that we're doing. So typically, using Stanford again as an example of a project that almost happened but didn't. So we did go to the city council with a term sheet of their community benefits that were proposed in advance of moving forward with the dates that we had in mind for their project approvals, so some months in advance. And that provided an opportunity for everybody in the public to be aware of what was being proposed as their community benefit contribution and to provide feedback to the city council about what they thought of that community benefit contribution and how things are being distributed. So that definitely is the pattern that we do for these type of things, where it's a separate topic just on that, not at the time that the project's getting a yay or nay, thumbs up or down. And it, you know, and when there's community meetings, as things move further along, it's also another topic that would be brought up for discussion.
Okay, but it sounds like we don't get to do a veto, like to vote against.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Jill, do you have a question?
Yes, I have a couple. So I would like to say +1 because everyone's comments in front row. And moving on to questions in relation to Belmont HIA. I have 2 questions. One, the October 14th City Council meeting, you said that the alternatives for height in residential uses would be discussed. I know a lot of us have laundry list of concerns that I won't dive into now. Are there any other topics that will be addressed in that meeting? Is it only the residential easement?
It's really gonna be focused primarily on those concepts of like, what are the building standards, the design standards, like primarily related to height and the transition to residential areas. Because we feel like this was like kind of the biggest area that shapes how we're drafting the plan. And we need to get city council feedback and get community feedback so we can continue with future steps. Doesn't mean we lost track of all the other comments.
Okay.
It's
So
kind of a critical path thing.
Parking, traffic. The other things, once we get the.
Yeah, we've got the notes, like we're thinking about those things, but a lot of those things are still under analysis and we're working on them. They're kind of on different paths.
Yeah.
And so this is so that we can keep the design standard conversation moving forward.
Okay. Can you walk me through the steps from now to the approval of the Belmont HIA in, I believe you said early 2026? What are all the things that happen and have to be approved? And where can we, as a community, be involved?
Okay, so I'll tell you generally, knowing that it depends on what feedback we get from the council when we go and talk with them, and that will, you know what I mean, depend on a little bit of the specifics. Okay. But what's happening now is we're, like I said, doing all this kind of technical work and working on all these reports and like kind of starting to draft things and bring some things together where we have the information that we need. Okay. So there's like a lot of work going on in the background with all the technical folks right now.
Yep.
We'll get this feedback from the city council. We've got a big list of things that the community asked us to consider. So we're kind of working those through and trying to work those into the different parts of the plan. And also we got a lot of requests for just more information or to explain things in a different way. So we've got that feedback too, right? And then we go forward with actually drafting a specific plan. Okay, so then there would be, we have pieces. But you know, when you're working on a big project, you just got little pieces here and there. So we're just working on all the little pieces and all the pieces have little holes and we're filling in the holes, right? You can kind of imagine that's where we're at right now. And then we kind of bring all of that together into an actual draft specific plan that we think will really help because then people can see it all together, right?
When do you expect that?
Not sure yet. That's my honest answer.
Okay.
So the draft specific plan might be kind of at the very end of this year. It might be the very beginning of next year. We're still working it out. You know, I don't want to promise something, do you know what I mean, to this group, but I want to be transparent about where we're at. Kind of depends on how things go, and what the council has to say. Yeah, and then we'll kind of make a decision like what's the best way to get information out to the community. Probably have a similar kind of meeting that we had on May 12th where we explain some things, give opportunity for feedback. Presumably we'll do a bunch of meetings with folks that had questions. We'll meet with some of the people that own properties, kind of stakeholder type meetings. So there'll be a series of those kind of things we'll be working on. We assume we'll get a whole bunch of comments back from everybody on the draft specific plan. And then we'll take some time to look at those and see what else we can integrate. The EIR will be going on at the same time. So then the draft EIR will be published. And if you're familiar with this, there's a public comment period on the draft EIR that's required by state law. It's like the draft EIR has a very specific requirements under the law. So we'll be doing that at the same, like not at the exact same time, but at a similar time frame. The public will have an opportunity to provide comments on the draft EIR. And if you're not familiar with that process, we literally have to respond to every comment that we get on the draft DIR, and then there's like a big stack of comments with all of the city's responses back. So then that will be happening. I'm sorry?
Environmental impact.
Okay,
Yeah.
got it.
Yeah.
So many acronyms.
Right, so then we've got those two big pieces. We've got the draft specific plan and we've got the draft EIR, and then you'll have a chance to provide comments on all of those. Then we take another look at everything, see if what changes we need to make to both documents, make another round of changes, put those back out, give everybody a chance to read it. And then if it's gone very smoothly, then we have a chance for the planning commission to have maybe a study session and a public hearing. We'll see how many meetings it takes, but there'll be some meetings with the planning commission and then some meetings with the city council. So that's kind of the broad brush. And the details within that, we're going to work out depending on how it goes and what the decision makers ask us to do.
And the city council person.
Yes.
Can you briefly explain what is the standard that the planning commission and city council use to assess the plan? Are they assessing against some other document? How do they decide yay or nay?
So this is a great question. Okay. And generally, it depends on that particular specific plan in that particular city. I can tell you what we anticipate to happen here, okay? But knowing that this varies a little bit, if you're familiar with specific plans or general plans, or maybe remember what happened with the BVSP. The general plan has fairly specific, like kind of goals for the HIA. We did a big analysis when we started this, and the general plan anticipated annexation of this area and really called it out as an employment area. So we've got certain foundational things that come from the general plan that have been kind of the driving force of everything that we've done so far. So we would expect this specific plan to be consistent with that vision and intent that's in the general plan. But you can imagine, you probably all have this in your work, you've got two big work products, and at the end, there's just a little bit of difference. Okay, there's like a little overlap where, some years have passed and some things have changed. So there might be a few things in the specific plan that are not totally consistent with the general plan. So it would be very common to do a small general plan amendment at the same time. Okay, so you would adopt a specific plan, and maybe you just have a few things you need to change in the general plan, because the state law requires that those things be consistent. Okay, and so don't be surprised if that happens. It doesn't mean like the rug's pulled out from under you. Do you know what I mean? Because we're doing a general plan amendment. It's just like a very typical process that has to happen. And in terms of who decides and how, adoption of a general plan and a specific plan are completely up to the city council. They decide. Okay, so they have to decide within state law, and there's state law requirements for general plans and specific plans. But if they've met the requirements of the law, it is the council's decision and like their discretion to adopt a general plan and specific plans.
Thank you, appreciate that. Harish.
Also from you, thanks. So I don't really understand how local government works. Maybe that's where my question is, kind of an overview. So you described just now how the city council had made a general plan and then maybe developing a specific plan for Harvard. But the area has not been annexed yet. So is that reversible? Can they just say, you know what, we don't want to do this?
Yes.
Is that a thing that we could influence? Is it also, it's currently, I guess, governed by the county, I assume, and so it has some zoning rules under the county. Do those rules have to be the same for us? Can we just say, you know what, we want that to be all residential, and can we influence that decision? And how do we do that? I don't even know, because we have one counselor who was in, this side of El Camino. And if we tell our counselor, that's one vote out of 5, right? So I don't even know if that's enough. Should we send in messages to all the counselors? Do we show up and say the same thing at multiple meetings? I don't really know how this works in terms of community influence on the decision, telling our council what we want them to do.
So let me back up to a couple of the technical questions that you started with. And thank you for asking those types of questions, right? Because we don't always talk about those in these meetings. Sometimes we kind of jump ahead, right? So the property right now is governed by the county. It's within like a mapped area, you can imagine, that's called a sphere of influence for the city of Belmont. And it's been in there for a long time. And what that tells us is that people imagine that the city may annex it into the city in the future. So this is common. General plans have a sphere of influence where you may annex things in from the county and bring it into the city. So that's kind of an underlying concept. And then there's development standards that are in place right now that are governed by the county, okay? They are basic development standards. How tall, how big, what can be located there, that the county's in charge of that. Until, if, when that's annexed into the city. You ask, does that have to happen? And the answer is no, that the city council will ultimately decide about approval of the specific plan and about approval of the annexation. So those decisions are not made, but it is in best practice as well as in the law for the city to engage in this. Think about it like a massive due diligence process to plan for what might happen, analyze the environmental impacts, and then have an informed decision about actually adopting the specific plan and annexing into the city. So we're kind of in the middle of that like big, long due diligence process, okay? And then in terms of participating in that, it's this, right? Like we work for the city and we work on this, like this is our job to work on this all day. Like, do you know what I mean? This stuff you saw on the screen is what I do at work, right? It's weird, right? And then so like we have a team that work on the different parts. And so you engage when we have the public meetings. And then you come to those public meetings or send public comments or email into the, do you know what I mean, into the site and tell us what your thoughts, questions, concerns are. Then we take that into consideration as we are making professional recommendations for the city council to consider. So we're taking best practices, our professional expertise, our team of experts, we're bringing that all together. We're taking your community comments, we're adapting our recommendations and kind of moving forward. So if you want to engage in that, you're encouraged to engage in those public comment time periods. And you can always do that through your council member for your district. But also when you email the council, they all get it. When you come to the public meetings, they receive that feedback, especially when you come to the council meetings, when these types of items go forward to them, they are listening for that feedback. Is that helpful?
With one additional thing, so you're working on building, that's your development, that's your job. You've been asked by someone, the council, to advance this idea based on the idea, and I'm not sure where this came from, I don't know who said this, that you said it's right off that we need more employment space, we need like office space, basically. And I don't know where that idea came from and why that is preferable to other things that could be done in this area. I would like to hear more about that. And since you were given a directive, of course, you've been given a hammer, everything else is a nail, right? So if I give you feedback, it's going to be in the context of you doing your job to do what the council told you to do, if I'm understanding correctly. And that's not the same as saying, you know what, I don't want you to do what you're doing. I want you to do something different. I want you to analyze a different plan because I don't like the plan. Not that necessarily that on one side or another of this, but I am realizing how this is basically a kind of a freight train and there is no way to stop it the way it feels. And that's scarier that these decisions were made, and it's not the annexation hasn't even happened, and that all the planning, all the reviews are for a particular plan, which I don't know, there seems to be a lot of objections.
So let me try to at least do part of that because of maybe a complete answer would kind of take all night, but let me hit on some key points there. The planning for this goes back to before adoption of the general plan in 2017. So this goes at least, and it's been in people's minds, the city considered annexing this area many years ago, decades ago. So it's been in people's minds for a long time. But this recent incarnation comes with the general plan we have today. So imagine the city started working on that in like 2013, 2014, and adopted that in 2017. So it's kind of taking the themes that came from that time period and carrying them forward, kind of each step along the way. To your question about why employment uses is a really important question. Okay, so I would answer it a couple ways. One of the reasons is for sort of fiscal stability of the city moving forward. We have to balance employment uses, which generate more revenue for the city than residential uses. And the city has a lot of residential uses, and there's an interest in creating more balance for economic stability so that we can continue to provide services far into the future. So that's one of the ideas. And then the other idea, I think that's important, is like a common planning concept that we have right now to try, you've maybe heard about the jobs housing balance, to kind of make sure that there's both jobs and housing in all the places have jobs and housing and hopefully transit access so that there's less people driving everywhere in the future. I know that that's kind of like, it doesn't feel real when we talk about this, right? But it is something that we're making incremental progress on in the Bay Area. And so we do see improvements in the jobs housing balance in terms of creating more long-term stability for communities. So that's two important concepts. There's more, but I think those are the most important ones.
Thank you. And I do just want to clarify that for District 1, our representative on the council is Gina Latimer-Lowe, and she will be precluded from voting on the Belmont HIA because of her proximity to the project. I believe, is it 300 feet or 500? That's my understanding. 500. So, you know, there's what, 4 other people that maybe we should direct our attention to, especially. And so I think we had a couple of questions back here. Sure. Go ahead.
I'm so new to this, so I may say something that is not, not tailored at all. Anyway, so regarding the Masonic building here, we're adding so many residential units here. In the past, there is a shopping center, right? Could it be possible the first floor be some restaurants, some kind of mom and pop, stores that would benefit the community? Is it too late again?
So I can tell you that this is one of the biggest issues that the Planning Commission and the community have been talking about. Our basic requirements in the city are that people do have to have commercial uses on the ground floor of these types of residential buildings. But I was talking about how state law gets involved. And in this case, it's kind of a long story, but I told the story at the Planning Commission meeting, if you're interested in watching that back. But because of the way that the state laws impact this type of project, we were not allowed to require them to have commercial on the ground floor, which made it up to the developer to decide. And the developer did not wish to decide.
Wait, we don't want to interrupt, just wait, let her talk.
Yeah, so the applicant did not choose to put commercial on the ground floor, and because of state law, we could not require them to.
Okay, do you want to, sir in the back, do you have any follow-ups?
Just in regards to 580 Masonic, I mean, do you guys apply any common sense to these projects? Do you know what the traffic is like there in the morning and the children going to school every morning? Can you imagine a backhoe and a whole line of dump trucks digging for 138 cars? Do you guys have that picture in your mind? Probably, do you have that?
Let's be respectful.
I'm just
Your tone
asking
is
a
very
specific
tough.
question.
Yeah,
I mean,
I understand your
I don't know
concerns.
where you guys live, but I see that.
I do, I walk that every day, I totally
I know.
understand what you're saying.
So can you picture that?
I can, so maybe perhaps.
And all I'm saying is, when the planning, I don't understand why, because I was at the planning commission, I was on that meeting. Why do they have to approve a project that is just, it seems kind of ridiculous. I mean, and like we all said, we all wanted some retail on the bottom floor, and I don't understand, is the planning commission obligated to vote for this project? There was only one person that voted against it.
The planning
So
commission.
that's my question.
Okay, so let me just back up a little bit, and I understand like the emotion and the feelings, and I understand why you would ask us like, are we reasonable people? We're actually in real life reasonable people.
Do you?
No, I honestly, I can't afford to own a home, so I rent an apartment in Menlo Park and drive up El Camino Real every day. So I'm in tons of traffic too. So we are actually reasonable people that get stuck between a rock and a hard place. And that's you all that we have to look in the face in the state of California that tells us what to do. Okay, like that's my honest answer. And I'm sorry that I'm the person that has to sit there and like
So what
present.
happens
Wait,
if the planning
sir,
commission
you continue
looks
to
at it?
interrupt.
I'm just-
That's your second warning, 3 strikes, you're out. Okay?
Yeah.
So just
You,
wait.
you asked the emotional question, so I'm gonna give you the emotional answer, okay? Because I feel like that's fair, right? And so we really get stuck, and it puts us in a really hard position. And we sincerely do our best to bring reasonableness to these conversations whenever we can. And I personally imagine my own family living in all of your homes and what that would mean. I don't take it lightly, okay? So that's kind of to the first part of your question. I'm sincere about that. Now, the second part, I think, is, does the state tell us we have to approve these projects? And the answer is yes. Okay, there's a state law that specifically says that if the project meets the objective standards, then the planning commission must approve it. You cannot deny it. The state law actually says you cannot deny or you cannot force them to reduce the density. Okay, so that is what the law says. And that does tie all of our hands. Acknowledge that.
And are there any conditions of approval or anything that can speak to these concerns about traffic or construction? I don't know if you got into this at the planning commission, but just the backhoe basically next to the kids
Yeah,
walking.
thank you. So the good part at least goes back to we were already talking about our general plan has mitigation measures and conditions of approval. So the good news is we can still apply all of those. Okay, so if you saw in the planning commission packet, there's 25-ish pages of conditions of approval that apply to this project. So a lot of those things that we can control, that's where we try to get involved and do what we can. So that is related to things like the construction staging program and, you know, looking out for the safety during construction of the project. Like just an example, right? Because I know a lot of people have asked about that. So those are the areas where our folks, do you know what I mean, city employees, can do our best to implement the best possible safe construction staging and things like that to try to make it better at least.
And we could do things like put conditions that time deliveries to the site so that it can't happen during school drop-off hours or school pickup hours. Like there are some controls that we have, but we cannot control that this can't be built at all. And we understand that traffic today in your area is not good at all. We understand that. And, you know, for projects like these, like they're not even required under state law to have any parking. This project could get built with 0 parking spaces, which again, can impact, you know, parking on your streets. At least thankfully, this project is providing some on-site parking. There are some, you know, aspects of this project that are better than what the state law would require it to be. So I'm not saying that this project is perfect or it's everything you want in a project. We hear loud and clear that the community really wanted ground floor retail. You know, unfortunately, our hands are tied by state law.
So I really appreciate that you're here tonight and that we're having another one of these meetings. I live on Furlong Street, so a lot of this is happening right around me. But I found out about this meeting because I went to community night out and there was a poster there. And so I put it on my calendar and a neighbor sent me a picture of the flyer. So I got a picture of the flyer early this week. But walking down my street talking to my neighbors didn't know this meeting was going on. They live on Furlong Street also. So we feel like this is going to, all of these plans are going to impact us a lot, but we didn't really get notified about it. I feel lucky I was able to get over here. But I think it's a little more than that. Ralston Avenue affects every single resident of Belmont. Every single resident of Belmont. So when you're notifying people about the project, when you're having a meeting like this, the whole city needs to know. The whole city, no matter what the law is, no matter what the general rule is, in the best interest of everybody, so that the community is really coming along on it, everybody honestly needs to know what's going on. And I totally hear you on how hard it is to sit there. And I have to give you a lot of credit for the grace with which you have answered questions tonight and for your honesty. Because I've heard before about the stuff where your hands are tied. And probably if for anybody who's super frustrated, we need to go beyond talking to you about it. We need to talk to people out, people who are out further, who are busily tying hands left and right. But for your part, you need to make sure the whole city knows.
Thank you. Do you have other questions? In the back. Yeah, and I'll get to you next. You can go ahead, Purple.
First of all, thank you for what you're doing. Second, because I'm right back here, everybody's talking that way, I can't hear everything, so maybe if I'm repeating something, I apologize. I do appreciate the first project. Trust me, I don't know how you're doing it. And I get everybody's concern here. I live on Oxford Way, and some mornings, I don't make appointments until after 9, including work, until after 9, not around noon, and not around 3. It gives me a very small window to conduct business or make any appointments, because I can't get out of Oxford Way, because there's no stop sign going crosswise on Hiller. I asked a few years ago, can you just put a keep clear sign, just paint it, and the city said no. And I said, well, I see in other parts of the city. Well, yeah, but you can't have it there. Okay. There's some simple things you could probably do with traffic to mitigate. Embed like the railroad ties in the streets, so when people go over, they don't hit speed bumps, but they get that sound, so they slow down. There are children there. People are trying to cross the street. We need something for speed in there. I realize the project's going to come no matter what. And actually, we are all kind of in a lucky spot, because had not Belmont had not met their goal. The rule was, if you don't meet the goal, developers could come in and put in anything they want. Do I have that right? They could put in anything they want. They could put up 12 stories if we had not met the guidelines. And our city met the guidelines. So in a way, well, I hate that it's going to be 6 stories. I think it's way overbuilt. I think it should be 4. But thank God it's not 12. We have hard structure there. We have nothing to absorb the water when it comes in. I know they did mitigation there at Hillard and Masonic and Wessex, because it always floods. It's going to flood again. There's just no doubt about it. The water's rising, we're sinking, we're putting heavy weight, as we know, along the bay. The heavy weight of the buildings is sinking and sinking and sinking, pressing down the weight. It's going to happen here. It's going to come in, but there's got to be some good mitigation. And also, I agree that people are being affected blocks away from this building, but they don't get notice of what's happening. If the city could do a study of what that traffic is going to affect, what the ripple effect is, and give notices to those homeowners and renters, because they live there, they have to get in and out. Let them know what their quality of life is going to be like, so they can get ready for it, if nothing else. Or at least talk to the city and give some ideas. But to give it for only a few hundred feet or a few thousand feet makes no sense. If you look at Hiller's traffic and Ralston's traffic, at any of the times I said I don't drive, I took pictures of it one day and it went forever. It could take me 25 minutes to get from Oxford and Hiller to the El Camino. I can walk it in 7.
Thank you. And do we have any additional questions? I know we have somebody on Zoom. The reason why it's 8:21 now, so I just want to make sure we focus. I know everyone has a lot of comments and feedback, and I would encourage you to contact the city. You You can email them at community development, but also they have city council meetings. You can sign up and get the agenda every time they have a meeting for planning commission or city council, and then you can show up or appear via Zoom, I believe still, right? So if you have comments about any of the things that were discussed tonight, you can always do that. That's a really great way to do it, and probably the most important forum, right? So your city council members can hear you. We have a Zoom question.
Yeah, thank you. Ralph Chambers.
Yes,
Go ahead.
hi. My name is Ralph Chambers. I live on Granada Street. And I definitely want to voice some of the frustration from my fellow neighbors in the Homeview area. Because we got this notification like yesterday. And why is it that we don't get more advanced notification? Because I am the block director on Granada, and I would make sure to pass this flyer out to make sure we get more of my fellow neighbors to attend these meetings so that we can actually have a voice in some of these decisions. So is there a reason why we have such short notice?
This is Caroline Pers from Homeview, and that is something that we're continuing to work on, to distribute flyers, email lists, so that our neighborhood will be aware of meetings like this, and certainly any city council or planning commission meetings. So I am so sorry, and we're going to continue to try to work harder to get the word out, especially on things like the HIA. So I will take the heat for that, and I'm sorry, and we need to continue to improve that. All right, next.
Yeah, and our other question, my other question is, with regards to these plans, again, there was not very, it's a lot of these things we just hear about it, and I don't feel like is there an opportunity for any of these things to be changed, especially on Masonic Drive? Is there that the height of the building, is it just a done deal at this point?
So the project of 580 Masonic was approved by the planning commission, but it was appealed. So the city council will consider that appeal. So the city council will still look at that project.
Who did the appeal? I'm sorry.
A resident appealed the approval of the planning commission. So the city council will have to look at it.
Okay, appreciate that. One more thing, is that on this, is that on the website where I can maybe join in that appeal?
It's already going.
Is it a matter of public record, the appeal, the contents of it, or how does that work?
I think it is, but no one's ever asked me that before.
Yeah, I've
so
never
we'll
seen
have
an
to find
appeal.
out, and
You said there'll be a city council meeting.
Yeah, we'll put the
correct?
right stuff on the website.
Right.
Yeah, let us find out.
That'll be on any agenda for the city council. That's a matter.
Yeah.
Correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep. You got
All
it.
right. Thank you, Ralph.
Thank you, Annie. I know you had some questions.
I just have a question about Belmont's policy on story posts. I've been talking with like a city civil engineer. I know that like in the city of Berkeley, for example, if there's any new building structure that exceeds 14 feet, there needs to be story posts that go up to show, basically it's like posts that go up that show the community, like the height, the mass, the bulk of what a construction project will look like. One of the reasons why I'm asking about that is because for that harbor industrial action plan, you guys are considering potentially having a building that's up to, just to piggyback off of what you said, like 11 stories. And I think it would be helpful for our communities to be able to visualize like how high that really is. I think if you ask like 3 people in this room to, to like marker, like place a marker of what you think 185 feet is, I can probably guarantee you that you're gonna get 3 different markers up there. So, I think it's not enough to just say, oh, just like imagine like a historical redwood oracle like building, because it's different looking at it from like across the highway versus like right up against your neighborhood, abutting your backyard, which is what's going to happen to some of my neighbors. I live in the Homeview neighborhood, and I think it would really help the community really truly visualize and understand like what exactly we're going to be facing in terms of sun blockage, like light pollution, and I just don't think that the community can really understand that we're talking like up to 11 stories here and what that's really gonna mean for our neighborhood. I also just wanted to add quickly 2 comments. One to everything that's been said about really the
about the benefits, the onus is really going to fall on the Homeview neighborhood, and I haven't seen anything on that slide that is specific to our Homeview or to our neighboring Irving Downs neighborhood. I also do agree with the residents from Furlong that this isn't just about our neighborhood. You are going to see increased traffic on Ralston, and that, just as you pointed out, that like, oh, there's probably someone here who, all of us have had a child or are going to have children that go through Barrett Community Center. Well, Ralston is the main road for everyone. So I do agree. It's not just going to affect our two neighborhoods, although we are going to bear the most impact. And I would like to see specific benefits that affect people that are going to be bearing the most cost. But also, I think it is really important for the rest of the city to know that this is happening. I only knew about this because Caroline informed our neighborhood. But like I also strongly believe that the onus of that clear transparency and that communication, having served like on the Berkeley like commission boards before, I don't think that transparency should be that onus should be borne by just a resident. I really think that the city needs to do a better job of communicating something that's going to impact like people's property values and like just their like privacy, their security, etc. So sorry.
So just to add on to what, Carolyn said, I highly recommend everybody sign up for city council or planning commission agendas. You don't have to go to the meetings, you can see what's on the meetings. But also, how many people here get the city's weekly newsletter? It's an email, and it comes out weekly. I definitely recommend when we have community meetings, we have the May 12th community meeting, we advertise that at least 3 times in the weekly newsletter leading up to it. We put information there. It's a really good resource to know what's going on in the city and to be aware of things that are upcoming. We try really hard to communicate, but everybody gets their information from different places. We could literally mail something to every single house in the city, which would cost us a fortune. And 3/4 of the people would throw it away and say they never received any information about it. So I understand it's frustrating when you haven't heard or you haven't seen the communication, but I strongly recommend that you sign up for those things and just take you get the email every Friday that it comes out, just like spend 10 seconds and glance at the headlines and see what might be of interest to you, because that is our #1 cost-effective way to get the word out, and we really do try to make sure that this information is in it, so that you know about meetings coming up and have those opportunities to provide feedback.
So our storybooks, could you address my question about the storybooks?
I've worked in a community that uses story polls as a tool. I can tell you they are most effective for buildings that are 3 stories or less. I've also had a lot of complaints about story polls. So people know like they would usually have like that orange flagging and then they put up like a physical, like an outline of what the building may be. So they were much more common before we had computer renderings. So it's really literally at the course of my career, it's like in the last 25 years, they used to be pretty common for 1 to 3 story buildings. And there's very few communities that still put up story polls because they create visual clutter. They're up for a lot of months. They cost a lot of money and most people do renderings. And these days buildings are just bigger. So that's why most places don't have story poll requirements anymore.
And the properties in the Harbor Industrial Area are private properties. So we don't own them. We can't go to a private property owner and say, put up a 180-foot pole.
And then, did you want to say something, or did she have I know you have a
Just
question. You've been so
last
patient. Go ahead.
So can the city of Belmont offer credits or incentives to builders like Prometheus? Because just to have that business or businesses on the ground floor.
We've really been thinking about that. So you can imagine we've been talking about it a lot and trying to think about, since the state law has taken away our ability to force people
You
to
have no stick anymore.
ground floor residential,
carrot.
do we have a carrot?
Do you have a
So
carrot?
this is exactly what we've been talking about. We're gonna see if we can come up with anything. I'm just worried that the state law has pushed so far that they don't really need those incentives anymore from us. It's something we used to do a lot in zoning, provide incentives. But when it comes to housing projects, there's not much there anymore. But we are thinking about it.
Okay, just a couple quick things. I want to do something more than just smile at you tonight.
Nice smile, though.
Well, thank you, appreciate it. Why don't you tell my family that? So, two things. There was a question in the back about parking and traffic and concerns. And you had mentioned a keep clear sign. That would be great. We do have a parking, traffic, and safety committee, and that's managed through our Public Works Department. I'm not sure if you've used them as an avenue to try and get your request started through them, but they do consider things. I mean, there is a process involved. I could research it, provide more feedback to you, but that's one avenue.
When I called the city, I forget.
Okay.
Maybe you guys could follow up after. the
Yeah,
meeting?
yeah. So why don't we follow up after the meeting on that? And then two, again, to add on to the smile comment, we have a Twin Pines stormwater detention basin project that's also being managed by our Public Works Department. While it's not under construction, it is advancing through.
What's it called again?
It's called the Twin Pines Stormwater Detention Basin Project, and it's designed to reduce flooding within Belmont Creek, specifically within the harbor industrial area. So there's a good write-up and description on the Public Works page. Definitely need some updating of that page as to where they are with the project now. But we've gone through the CEQA process for it. We have to get RFPs and bids, but it's designed, again, I'm not gonna go into it, but there's, I can follow up with you on a direct link to that project page. But again, it is the city looking forward to try and address infrastructure issues that are to the west, to the east, because it is a known issue.
Yeah.
So, anyway,
Cool. Thank
that's my 2 cents.
Are there any other questions? Adam, go ahead.
This is Kathy, I'm Carolyn, we talked, I might just write an email about this, but in these projects, I'm really concerned about the ELI population, because that's what my son is. And I'm not sure what I'm gonna do with it when I pass away. So I'm looking for permanent supportive housing, so I might ask you the question, is anything happening in Belmont around it? Because I know that I represent not only myself, but a whole group of parents. They were aging, and I'm like counting the years, how many years do I have left that I can keep caring for my son? So I'll address that question, because we talked about the low income population at this project, but what about the ELI, those with disabilities that are going to have on-site supports they're at high risk of homelessness, so we want to prevent that.
So there are a couple of 100% affordable housing projects that have been approved, but have not yet been constructed. So the target populations haven't entirely been determined because, as you know, a lot of that comes when you determine what funding sources.
Right.
And those are the 2 projects which I know are very.
On the El Camino, the small.
They're the ones that are like on either side of Wendy's, the 678 Ralston and the 951 Old County Road. Those are projects, there's no on-site, they have limited on-site parking. I think they're
Like 5 spaces on one,
7,
like 3 on
yeah,
another.
but they're, those are projects that were also required to be approved by the city. I know 2 years ago was here, letting you guys know about those. And those are probably opportunities I can connect you with the developer to talk about that. Cause I don't know what funding sources they're targeting and whether they do have, ELI means extremely low income. So those are like 30% or lower of area median income. So like the lowest income, zero income.
Isn't that project on El Camino that used to be that old gas station?
So that one
is
is
that
already,
an ELI one?
So that has extremely low income units. It has a mix from extremely low income all the way up to low income. So that's from 0 to 80% of area. Sorry, these are all technical terms.
It's a smaller one.
But that one, I think the population that it'll serve has already been determined.
Okay.
So not
right.
Yeah.
Okay.
But I'm happy to connect with you. I'll talk to you after.
You said there's a Zoom question.
What, there's a couple that.
Go ahead.
So I think there's generally a couple of questions around how to communicate, so text messages, is there an opt-in? Is there a way to kind of really communicate better
So
with the
one of the
residents
things-
using
yeah, one of
texting?
the things that I'm thinking about is, what if when we pull the PowerPoint together, we also give a list of like the websites and the contact places and how to sign up for the
Sure.
email list?
Yeah,
And,
yeah.
because there's a couple of different email lists, and you
Okay.
might want to be on one or all of them. So
All right.
why don't we put that into the information we give back to you?
Absolutely.
And then you can distribute it
Yes.
to the
Do that for
two
both the
neighborhoods.
association.
And there's just one more question. Do you compare our projects with the city of San Carlos, with our neighbor?
Yeah,
Is there-
we have close connections with the city of San Carlos. I have worked there previously, so I'm very familiar with a lot of their projects. I know their staff very well. They're also working on a specific plan for their area on the other side of the creek at the same time as us. So we're in communication about that. And we also keep up with the types of projects that they're approving there as well.
Okay.
Probably have similar flood issues there too. I'm sure.
Any
They
other
do, yeah.
questions for Zoom?
No, there are some
Okay.
comments, but we can kind of provide it.
Okay, other questions, solely questions at this point in time? Okay, go ahead. Yes.
There is a construction material going on the, let's see, 101 side of the Caltrain station. It's been there for years, like next to the cleaning place. Do you know what's happening or what's going to happen there? You know,
I think it's so right, the empty parcel of land that's right adjacent to the Caltrain station.
Yeah.
I think that's construction staging that Caltrain is leasing from the city to store some materials for some.
I see, so just go material.
Yeah, nothing's happening there.
Oh, they're building a garden.
That would be lovely.
That's a
That would be great.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay, so one concern that I have, and I just wanted to throw it out there and make sure that this is, this consideration taken with this as you move forward, is we talked a little bit about Hiller, and kind of the traffic challenges with building around Hiller, but I'm also thinking of Harbor, and the problem that I see is with not necessarily traffic getting into, if you have all your driveway entrances on Harbor, it's easy to get into. But if your destination is northbound 101 and you can't go down Harbor, you're going to flood Elmer, or you're going to get caught up in El Camino. And so, I guess I'm not sure what my question is. My concern is that you do an environmental impact study, which says that this is a significant impact, which is not mitigatable, and then nothing happens. And so I want to make sure that, you know, I just put out there that we'd be really concerned as to when you identify how traffic would circulate, especially I'm thinking out of the businesses at the end of the day, that there's a plan to mitigate in some way. And it feels like Elmer is so tight, I don't know what you do. Hiller is so tight, I don't know what you do. But I feel like if you walk away and you don't do anything, you've left everybody with a pretty.
But Furlong and Granada and Hiller, all of our little streets that right now, are capped. It seems like it's such a little thing to just change, what you call that thing at the end? The draft specific plan, you said they would just do little tweaks. Maybe they just do a little tweak at the end to make it possible for people to get out. So you open up those gates so people can go that way. Our streets are really narrow. Really narrow, and we have these little one-car garages, so people are parked on the street also, and yeah, I can just foresee this exit, along with the people who actually park along Elmer to go down our streets to go to their jobs.
So your points are well taken. These are the things that we're talking about and we're analyzing with the transportation engineers that do this for a living. These are the things we're talking about. We're going to do our best to put forward the best solutions that we can come up with. And then we know that you're all going to take a look at it and provide feedback. And we
If we know about the meeting, we know.
Yeah.
Just
Well,
hire
we're-
only people who live south of us.
We're working on the communication. We're going to get some, you know what I mean? We're going to improve that a little bit. But I just want to validate, I really hear what you're saying. And you just met me, do you know what I mean? But I'm the person working on it. And so if it's me, I will not at the last minute take that out. And if it gets taken out, you'll see in the staff report, hey, this thing got taken out, and I'll draw everybody's attention to it. Okay, because that's the way that I work. I really try. If I hear that, like, I really try to flag it if something comes up in the future. So I don't think you're gonna have a bait and switch here, but also part of the process is that we put something forward, you give feedback, the council then considers all of that together. So that is the process and we welcome it. Okay, so I just wanna make sure that like folks understand that.
All right, I think the time is now 8:42. I do want to thank you all for coming tonight. I really appreciate your questions and comments. I do also want to mention, I mean, there is a reason to be here. There is a purpose, and the city, I think, is listening. I know with respect to the HIA, I know several of us voiced our concerns about the height, and it sounds like some alternatives are being pursued. I don't know what that means, but I'm certainly looking forward to seeing that and what that's going to look like. So I would just encourage everyone to continue to email, come to these meetings. I will do better in Homeview. I'm trying to increase contact and communication. I'm so sorry, we work on that. And also very much thank you to the city for being here and explaining all these plans. Please don't forget to sign out and leave your email. And then if you want to tell me if you're in Homeview, for example, and want to be included on any sort of list for additional notice, please put that in there. So thank you again.
Good night, everyone.
Okay, you should have a t-shirt that says it wasn't me, blame Sandra.